Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening to explore the meaning and value of wonder in education and society. My name is Will McDonald. I'm the Director of Admissions here at Webster University, Geneva, and I'm very pleased to introduce you to tonight's speaker. Glăveanu is Associate Professor and Head of the Department of Psychology and Counseling here at Webster University, Geneva, also Associate Professor at Bergen University in Norway, and Director of the Webster Center for Creativity and Innovation here in Geneva campus. His work focuses on creativity, imagination, culture, collaboration, and societal challenges. He's edited the Palgrave Handbook of Creativity and Culture and the Oxford Creativity Reader, and has co-edited the Cambridge Handbook of Creativity across domains and the Oxford Handbook of Imagination and Culture. He also co-edits the book series Palgrave Studies in Creativity and Culture for Palgrave Macmillan. In addition, Vlad is editor of Europe's Journal of Psychology, an open access peer-reviewed journal published by PsychOpen in Germany. He received the 2018 Berlin Award for the APA, the American Psychological Association, for outstanding early career contributions in the field of aesthetics, creativity, and the arts. His most recent books are Mobilities and Human Possibility, and the book which is virtually launched today. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed one. The Possible, a Sociocultural Theory, and the book which is virtually being launched tonight and in this event called Wonder, The Extraordinary Power of an Ordinary Experience, from Bloomsbury 2020. So without further ado, I will introduce you to not only a great editor and a great writer, but also a fantastic professor. Vlad, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Will, and thank you everyone for joining. I'm still multitasking a little bit and trying to admit people in, but I will try to focus as well, and I will show you, this is the book that you also see in a little snippet over there on the slide. It would have been my great pleasure to be in a physical room with you and pass this book around. But maybe one day we're going to be able to meet in person, and I can share the physical copy with you. But what I thought about for this talk is actually, because I'm so excited about the topic of wonder and wondering, to walk you through some of the main ideas from this book. And I would be very happy to continue the conversation with those of you who are interested in this area. So basically, I think it was 2 years ago when, no, 3 years ago, in October, 3 years ago, when we started the Webster Center for Creativity and Innovation. And I remember I gave the first talk, and it was on creativity. And now 3 years later, I come back with a new topic. It took me about 3 years to start and really, dig into this new area. And the world was obviously very much different 3 years ago. So that in and of itself is a topic of wonder about the situation we're in now. But my real inspiration about wonder obviously did not come with the pandemic. I'm still wondering about everything going on, as I'm sure you are. But when I think about wonder, when I started a few years ago thinking about it, I think images like this one come to mind. So I'm thinking about the way children and the young experience the world, the way they are mesmerized very often by what they see. And I also think about, well, not dead birds in particular, but I've put this for a reason here, not to distress you, but these are finches. And if you remember Darwin in his legendary journey, he discovered differences between the body and the aspect of finches who were living on the mainland versus Galapagos. So he started thinking about and wondering, I would hypothesize, why these differences existed and where they came about. So wonder as an essential element not only of human development, but also of scientific discovery. And of course, when we talk about wonder, art cannot be too far behind. And we have here the signed urinal of Duchamp. I don't know if for many this is exactly the best artwork to be represented, but it's definitely a topic of wonder and wondering when it comes to the many audiences and the way in which Duchamp managed to problematize what art actually is. So basically opening new questions about the meaning, the value, the role of art in society. And finally, we also, of course, know about wonder from all sorts of stories and legends and myths and novels, including Alice in Wonderland, right? a novel that not only deals in many ways with the topic of wonder, but also invites wondering on the part of the reader. So there are many things that can make us wonder, but one of the big questions I want to address is what actually is wonder, right? We do talk about it on a daily basis. We have, you know, I think it's one of the most mentioned words somehow, because very often, at least I catch myself saying, I wonder, I wonder, right? And maybe that happens to you too. So in an everyday life type of situation, when we talk about wonder, we often mean being curious or being intrigued or simply thinking about something. And what I'm going to argue today is that wonder is not really that. It's not as extended as this, because if we were to think of wonder just as an act of thinking, we would be diluting it and losing its deeper meaning. Now, there are people who talk about wonder in much more poetic terms, like Parsons, you know, coming from philosophy, for whom wonder is the spark of excitation leaping across the gap between man, women, right, and the world. So this is a very interesting and poetic way of representing it, but perhaps not very, very clear. So what is wonder at the end of the day? And I thought, of course, I have my own definition. I thought about maybe telling you the whole presentation and then ending with it. But then I thought again, and I'm going to just put it out here or already from the start, just for you to understand a little bit where I'm coming from when I'm talking about wonder and wondering. So for me, wonder designates a particular type of essentially human experience, although I'm not going to, you know, kind of single-handedly exclude all other animals or creatures from wondering, but it is a very human type of experience whereby the person becomes more or less suddenly aware of an expanded field of possibility for thought and or action and starts engaging more or less actively in exploring this field. So there are a few things about this definition that maybe caught your eye. One of the things is that I personally relate wonder a lot with the sense of possibility in our life. I believe that when we wonder, the things we wonder about and the kind of people or events that constitute our wonder are those things that can expand our sense of the possible. Also, I'm thinking of wonder in two different ways. One of them in two facets of wondering. One of them has to do with being aware of new possibilities, and the other one with exploring these possibilities. And as I'm going to argue through the presentation, these two are definitely connected, intimately connected to each other. I'm trying to see if I can admit actually new participants. One second, sorry about that. Okay. So this is the working definition of wonder. Now, if we are to look back at history, one of the things I like to do when I start researching a new topic is to understand the etymology of the concept I'm working with. So one of the roots, and there are Latin roots and there are Greek roots to the words we use today for wonder and wondering. Of course, the word itself has a Germanic origin. But if we go back to the Greek roots, we find, and I apologize in advance for Greek speakers, the word taumazein. I do not know how it's correctly pronounced, but taumazein as wonder. And if we go further back, we see actually a mythological figure, a god who is in the middle here, Taumas, who was one of the gods of the ocean. It wasn't Poseidon, you know, very famous. It would have been very easy for me to pronounce perhaps, but it was one of the gods representing the ocean. And of course, here we can see already a bit the importance of the sea, the ocean, right, for the ancient Greeks, and the fact that this idea of wonder and wonderment was closely connected to something they were so much in touch with, right, the miracles and even the dangers of the sea. And what's interesting is that mythologically, this god Taumas had several children. And two of them are depicted here. On the right side, you see Iris, or the rainbow. And this was the messenger taking messages from, you know, people to the gods. So kind of the celestial connection. And with the rainbow, with the idea of the rainbow, we have already a natural phenomenon that, of course, kind of cultivates wonder in whoever looks at a rainbow. But also we have quite a positive and uplifting image of wondering as being able to connect to something that is transcendental, that is kind of beyond this world. But we also have on the other side, if you probably recognize, the harpies. The harpies were also the daughters of Taumas, and they were half women and half birds, and they were rather dangerous, and they were carrying messages as well, which is another beautiful kind of metaphor of communication, right? But between this world and the underworld. So from Iris and the beauty of the sky, we go to the harpies and the storms and the perilous aspects of the sea. In a way, these are all products of wonder and wondering. And as we're going to see in a moment, throughout history, we have related to the phenomenon of wonder in quite different ways. Sometimes we looked at it very positively, and other times we were quite terrified by what wondering can lead us to. So if I'm to give a very, very short and kind of potted history of wonder, I think, of course, we have to start with Socrates, right? And his remarkable or memorable line that philosophy begins in wonder and nowhere else. So Socrates and ancient Greek philosophers, including Plato and Aristotle, were very much interested in wonder as a way of problematizing what we usually take for granted. Philosophy begins in wonder because what wonder does is help us challenge or question what we usually assume as known. This was the mission of Socrates, and this is why, by the way, you see him depicted here in this painting, drinking hemlock, drinking poison, because he was actually condemned by the Athenian political class for corrupting the mind of the young. And this is where the dangers of wonder, or too much wonder, perhaps come in, right? Because the political class thought that the young who were trained by Socrates ended up questioning everything and not being able to take action, to do something concrete in the world. So does wonder paralyze us in some ways? Does it leave us unable to act or to think any further? That is one of the big questions that Socrates leaves us with. Then we jump forward to the 17th century, and we have one of the fathers of modern philosophy, Descartes, who is, unlike the antiques, he had quite a dismissive way of looking at wonder. And he thought about it in terms of one of the first passions of the soul. And you might think, well, passion doesn't sound too bad. It means engagement and connection. But for Descartes, actually, the passions were things that sometimes were contradicting our capacity to reason. So when we get very much, as Descartes would say, consumed by what he called admiration, that was the word at the time for wonder and the word he used in his work. When we get consumed by admiration, we're very much trapped by the thing we're looking at. And therefore, we stop thinking perhaps logically about it, which was an important aspect of reason. But then we jump again through time, and in the 18th and 19th centuries, we have philosophers like Burke and Kant and others who recover the value of wonder, the kind of the value it had in antiquity, and reshape it this time into another concept that maybe you're familiar with, which is the sublime. So the sublime is this notion of, basically it was an experience that was at the same time kind of very deep and profound and terrifying. So for instance, watching a volcano erupt, or even watching an eclipse, right? It is a moment where we experience the sublime. We are dwarfed by these extremely big natural phenomena that we both admire and are terrified by. So this was the way in which 17th and 18th century philosophy dealt with wonder as the sublime. We jump again through time, last jump, I promise, and we come closer to 20th century, 21st century, and in the work of both quite a legendary philosopher, Heidegger, and the work of William James, one of the key early psychologists, wondering is again recovered as a very interesting and positive phenomenon. So for Heidegger, wonder had to do with dwelling in the unknown. The fact that you can occupy that space of not knowing was for him a very productive state of mind. Questioning that asks what the most usual might be such that it can reveal itself as what is most unusual. So for Heidegger, wonder was essentially about making our familiar unfamiliar to us. And that's a very Socratic notion. And also William James talked about wonder as a way of seeing the familiar as if strange as being familiar. So what we have here is a bigger theme, historical theme. On the one hand, relating wonder to knowing and especially not knowing, and the value that not knowing might have for our psychology, for education, for society. This is what I'm gonna basically explore with you a little bit further. And on the other hand, we have an image of ups and downs and historical kind of moments of waxing and waning when it came to the phenomenon of wonder. I would propose, and I did a bit of a literature search, as you can imagine, that nowadays people talk more and more about wonder. And I'm noticing that across the board, you know, in the social sciences, in the humanities, in philosophy and psychology, certainly. So I think we're at a moment in which, yet again, we're rediscovering the topic. So it's a big burden on us to see what we make of it for the 21st century. So wonder is part of this, as you probably saw by now, this very complex vocabulary that includes much more than just the word wondering. I mean, I've been mentioning perhaps here and there surprise, curiosity, admiration, right, in the work of Descartes, even suspense or stupor or awe, you know, another big topic today, amazement, astonishment, contemplation, pondering, the sublime. All of these are part of a wider vocabulary that for me is about how we engage with the possible, right? But I will propose that wonder has something very specific to offer vis-a-vis all of these other phenomena. And I'm gonna, you know, very briefly try to convince you of that. In order to do it, I want to just take up a little bit of the two phenomena that are perhaps the closest to wonder, and one of them is curiosity and the other one is awe. So what does curiosity mean? Well, at a very basic level, it's the desire to know or to learn something. We sometimes talk about epistemic curiosity, and we want to learn something about unusual things, people, or events. But curiosity is not really the same as wonder. Rubinstein had a very nice way, I believe, of describing it when he said, curiosity has nothing to do with the contemplation that wonders at being, taumazein, right? The Greek word I mentioned. It has no interest in wondering to the point of not understanding. Rather, it makes sure of knowing, but just in order to have known. So curiosity, of course, and I'm not downplaying curiosity. And if there are any fans or researchers working on it, rest assured I'm very interested in curiosity in and of itself. But the trajectory of curiosity is actually going from not knowing towards knowledge. That is the way curiosity moves, making the unfamiliar, the surprising, the unusual familiar to us. And in that process, in a way, we kind of simplify that thing. We tame it, we appropriate it, we make it known. And we might lose the capacity to be surprised by it anymore, which is something that wonder does, as you probably figured it out, right? So for many thinkers, not only Rubinstein, but Heidegger as well, and Burke and others, curiosity is quite a superficial state of mind that is moving very quickly from one topic to the other, while wonder invites us to have a deeper reflection about the nature of things. Now, if we move to awe, so being in awe, right, it's again quite in the proximity, in the vicinity of wonder. And awe is this feeling of being amazed or astonished, and is gripping and deep and usually mixes fear and attraction. You can already notice that what we say today about awe is very similar to how 17th, 18th century philosophers talked about the sublime. Right? So the kind of the more direct translation of the sublime today would be the state of awe. So when we are in awe, we are very different from curiosity. In curiosity, we are in an active and dynamic state of mind in which we want to find out. Often when we're curious, we ask questions, we do things, we manipulate objects, you know, we try out things. In awe, we stand still, as it were. We are dwarfed by this enormity that we're experiencing, right? So Nussbaum had a very, very nice, I find, distinction between wonder and awe. Wonder and awe are akin, but distinct. Wonder is outward moving, exuberant, whereas awe is linked with bending or making oneself small. In wonder, I want to leap or run. In awe, to kneel. So it's a very, very nice kind of way of putting it, because I think in this passage, wonder all of a sudden reminds you of curiosity. The kind of critique addressed to curiosity of being much more exuberant and outward looking is now addressed in a way to wonder. So we can already imagine a bit of a continuum going from curiosity on the one hand to awe on the other hand. In curiosity, we're active, dynamic, looking for things. In awe, we are slightly paralyzed by the exuberant or the transcendent nature of what we're looking at, right? Where is wonder? Wonder is somewhere in the middle, but wonder, I would argue, is much, much more than just A plus B. It's not curiosity plus awe. You know, as we famously say about systems, something is greater than the sum of the parts. So wonder, because it combines elements from these processes, becomes something special and something different. One more point to just show you once more how important this continuum is for wonder. In the literature on wonder, often people distinguish between wondering at and wondering about. So wondering at, to cut to the chase, is quite close to curiosity. It's quite close to awe in many ways. So when you wonder at something, you are just grabbed by that feeling of surprise and novelty, right? When you wonder about, you become much more active and you start doing things with the topic that you were wondering at, right, just a moment ago. So the important thing for me is actually how we can recover, or how can we think of wonder in this integrated way in which we don't disconnect wondering at and wondering about. To give you the example of education that I'm going to obviously come back to towards the end of the talk. If you're a teacher who wants to cultivate wonder in the classroom, you have different things at your disposal, different things. One of them is you can surprise students with an unexpected fact, with a funny video, with, I don't know what, a meme or something that connects to their life, you know, something that really triggers them and makes them curious. In many ways, what you would be doing then is helping them to wonder at the topic, right, you're bringing up. On the other hand, and good teachers obviously do that, you would help them explore that topic that they're now interested in. You would give them the tools and the questions to help them, you know, reach their own conclusions. In a way, you would be helping their wondering about. Now, my argument is that an excellent teacher would try to do both and to keep these sides in equilibrium. There is no point in coming to the classroom, showing a funny video, everyone laughs, everyone is intrigued, but then you do nothing with it. You don't help them go further from that video to understand something deeper about the topic. Equally, it's perhaps less effective to just give them, you know, push more and more concepts and tools at them without helping them wonder at things in any way. So this is just one way of saying that I'm a firm believer in the need to kind of look at wonder as a much more integrated phenomenon that really puts together and integrates this wondering at and wondering about. Okay, and what I did actually in the book is I proposed two models of wonder. One of them is more structural, and one of them is a bit more processual or dynamic. So in the more structural model, I was interested to understand the difference and yet also the connections between wonder and these very closed kind of type of phenomena, awe, curiosity we already talked about, but also contemplation or pondering. There are so many, again, the vocabulary of you know, possibilities is so much more extensive. And what I came to realize is that actually what makes wonder so special, at least for me, is that it keeps in balance two different tendencies, at least two different tendencies. One is that between being passive and active. So when you wonder, you are both passive and active. You know, it's a very special state of mind where you can both be kind of, you know, for a moment be taken aback by what you see and then start exploring it. And you're also both immersed and detached. You're immersed in the sense that you're very close and very kind of in contact with the thing you're wondering about, but wonder also gives you that space of reflection to be able to think about it in a deeper, in a more meaningful way. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Vlad, so you chose wonder, obviously for your wonder will be perfect. It's not about being perfect, obviously, but it is about trying to map up this territory where, at least for me, curiosity is a very active and immersed state of mind. Awe is immersed but much more passive. Contemplation is passive and detached. When you contemplate, you really stand back, as it were, from reality and all of that. And pondering is active, a bit more active than contemplation, but still quite detached. Wonder is somewhere in the middle. And if you're thinking, okay, but what happens when we wonder? One of my hypotheses and the proposal I have in the book is that we do at least three things that come together. One of them is that we become aware of an expanded field of possibility. All of a sudden, there is something that happens that creates a bit of a rupture in our experience, and it opens up so many new questions or possibilities for us. That is the awareness part. And hand in hand with that goes the exploration. We start either, physically in an embodied way doing things. We start imagining, fantasizing, constructing all sorts of ideas. We start playing with the topic of our wonder. So these two things are very much interconnected. And of course, they take you back, I would assume, awareness to wondering at, and exploration to wondering about. But there is something added, something extra, in a way, the glue that holds them together. And this, for me, in lack of a better word, I called excitement. It's the excitement of possibility. When you wonder, you realize you don't know, but that is not a bad thing or not a bad state of mind. Actually, it's a positive thing. It's a resource that keeps you interested and excited about what might be possible, what is yet to come. So for me, the experience of wonder mixes all of these, and I'm not looking at them as stages. I'm not saying that you go first through awareness, then exploration, then excitement. For me, it's the interplay between awareness of new possibilities and exploration of them, all brought together by this excitement about what is to come. I just want to make one note here. I'm not associating wonder necessarily with positive emotion. When I say excitement, it doesn't mean that you feel super happy about what you're thinking about. You can also wonder about sad or depressing. I mean, we wonder about COVID, I assume everyone does, quite a lot, or the political situation in the world today. That's not something that makes you particularly happy, I would assume. But there is still an element of in psychology, we would call it arousal. There is still an element of motivation to go on, to proceed, to find out more, right? So that is the meaning of excitement, just to clarify. Okay, so for the second part of the talk, I want to just take you through some concrete examples of how we can get these processes going within applied or concrete contexts, and then take you to the sphere of society and politics and the sphere of education to exemplify some of these ideas. So what triggers wonder, right? What are the conditions, what are the kind of contexts that help one wonder? Here you have Picasso and his famous bull's head, right? And the bull's head was made up of, as you either know or you can see here, the saddle of a bicycle and the handles of a bicycle that suddenly became the head of the bull and the horns of the bull. Of course, the story that Picasso told was that he came across this deconstructed bike, different bike pieces, and he saw these two elements together, and then he had this big insight of this can be a work of art, right? It doesn't need anything else. It's so simple and it's magnificent in its simplicity. So one of the big points here for me is that chance events and accidents are very much a trigger for wondering, right? So whenever in our experience we come across something that is unexpected, we might get the impulse, to think about what is possible, what was made possible by this accident or by this chance encounter. Of course, when we talk about serendipity, because in many ways Picasso's work of art came out of a moment of serendipity, people also talk about the prepared mind. So you have the chance event and you have the mind that is prepared to encounter that. Because if any of us, or certainly if I had encountered a decomposed bicycle, I would have probably thrown the pieces away, right? I would not have thought of making a bull's head out of them. So you had to be Picasso in a way, with his interest and life history and all of that, to be able to see or to pick up on what had just happened. But wonder is not only a state of mind. It's not something that you carry in your mind. Wonder happens in between you and the world. It was something that triggered, you know, an element of curiosity and wonder within Picasso. But it was the openness that wonder, you know, made possible for Picasso to stay and think, what is here? You know, it's a bike, but it can also be something else. And as we will see, and I'm going to talk about later on, what Picasso did with this artwork was also to turn the familiar into something unfamiliar. We all know bikes, right? They're very common. But to see pieces of a bike made into an artwork, that is unfamiliar. We start problematizing, you know, Picasso helps us wonder about what actually is a bike. It's a thing we, you know, that we use to be carried from here to there, but it is also so much more. It can even be art, right? It can even be the head of a bull. So that is for me at least a good example of a wonder-inducing kind of artwork. And then just you know, to say that of course artists in particular know very well or try as much as possible to include chance and serendipity into their process, and taking it to the extreme perhaps in Dada art and Dada types of poetry. Maybe some of you know, there is even this famous, you know, kind of manifesto type of description of how to make a poem. You basically cut words and you put them in a bag and you shake them, and then, you know, you take them out, and whatever composition came out, that is your poem, right? So that is randomness to the extreme. And yet it can be, you know, one other way to stimulate wonder, because in this randomness, things will be associated that were kept separate before. And you might think, what might be, again, the deeper meaning of that? I never thought about it this way. So chance and accidents can be a good trigger of wonder. And then there is the flea. Well, the flea in itself, you know, it's not perhaps the best or nicest insect to be wondering about, but I want to take you with this image to the discovery of the microscope and the work of Robert Hooke, who was one of the first guys to start illustrating, and he developed these very commercial illustrations of what people started seeing with the first microscopes when they looked at things that before were not available to our sight. We would never know that a flea has hair. I would want not to imagine that, but you know, now we all know because we use the microscope. So when the microscope was invented, and also when the telescope was invented, right, our possibilities of understanding the world expanded enormously. All of a sudden, the smallest little thing, the flea, the fly, you know, every little insect, every little creature became available to us in a very different way. So our understanding of it and our look at it changed. Something very familiar like the flea became all of a sudden like almost this monstrous big creature that I'm sure later on could inspire, you know, alien type of, of movies and structures. That revealed itself as something different. So another very important process of wondering, as I mentioned before with Picasso, is taking what is familiar to us and starting to question it. Problematizing what we take for granted. So it can be a flea, it can be, you know, a glass of water. What else is there? Of course, there is the glass. This is what convention tells me. This is what I expect, you know, this is how I relate to it. But there is also something more there. A glass of water can become, you know, the beginning of a mathematical or geometrical demonstration. I can maybe sign it and call it a piece of art, although probably I need, you know, Deschamps' fame and all of that. But, you know, one can imagine. If I am a poet, I can start writing a beautiful poem about, you know, the reflection of water within the glass. So the mere glass of water is much more than a simple glass of water. That is one way in which wonder proceeds. It takes the common and it makes it extraordinary for us. And this is what Socrates with his method did, actually. He would take the simplest or seemingly simple ideas and start questioning people. Why is that? Why would you say that? And then they would discover that actually they don't know. They did not have clear and certain knowledge about almost anything. And that puts them in a rather extreme, but definitely a wonderful state of mind. Now, this process of making the familiar unfamiliar is very much common for children's play. Here I have some objects. I'm not entirely sure they come out of children's play, but I'm sure if a child, especially, you know, my toddler who's roaming around, if she would see these objects, she would be very excited and put them to a use that I could never imagine, right? So what children often do in play, and young children generally, it's because they don't fully understand the conventional yet. They can free their action and their minds, and something can become something else, something, you know, quite established in a certain way, becomes something completely different. So another method perhaps of cultivating wonder would be to stimulate or to foster playfulness, both in children and also in adults. A playful state of mind is a state of mind that is open to this difference between how it's usually used, how something usually is used and what it is, versus what it could be and what else, you know, it represents for us. So that is yet another perhaps wonder-inducing process. Another one is tinkering, right? So we live in an age where maker spaces and maker labs and all of these are popping up everywhere, and they do it for a reason. And all this movement, the do-it-yourself type of movement, right, that is flourishing, and the recovery of craft and the value of craft and crafting, all of these have one common kernel in a way, and that's the idea of exploration, free exploration, tinkering, trial and error. You do something and you see what happens. You discover something and you don't know what to do with it, but you keep it because it might become useful later. For me, this attitude towards the world, this attitude of free exploration is again very much conducive for wondering. Because when you have something, and here we have all sorts of little bits and pieces, you start looking at them not only as what they are. Some of them are literally garbage or pieces of trash, or random things that you found, but you start looking at them as what they could be. And you still don't know what they could be, but you have them around because they might come in handy. And you open your mind towards the object not only as is in front of you, but, you know, to the potentialities of that object. So tinkering and exploration are yet another way to cultivate wonder. Now, maybe you've seen this image. It did the rounds on the internet. It's a noodles cooler. And I came across it, I think it was on Twitter, the world's most famous failed inventions. So probably you don't have one at home because it was an invention that never took off. The reason I put it here is to make us aware of the fact that failure is yet another, going back to almost the idea of accidents. Accidents are not only happy accidents where something unexpected and useful is revealed. Sometimes accidents, have a very negative, at least on the short term, we discover an impossibility. But even that impossibility can be the trigger for a next moment of wondering. I don't know, I'm not an inventor, but when I look at this image, I can also imagine or hypothesize what else you could do with that little fan, or how we can do this better. So failure can also be reflecting on failure can be a source of wonder. And last but not least, and kind of taking us towards politics, society, and education, I propose to you that other people, everyone around us, is a subject of wonder. If you remember, Socrates talked about philosophy as being born in wonder, but he also had this beautiful way, and then the command of Socrates and the philosophies, know yourself, knowing thyself, right? So that is an invitation to discover yourself as a source of wonder and as a being who wonders. So how do we wonder about other people? I'm going to propose together with Cairns that this is a very special way of understanding others. It's not being curious or nosy about them. It's very different. So if I may read this quote that I find absolutely exceptional. Others too are a wonder, not a mystery to be solved or an alien to be dissected, analyzed, or totalized, but a wonder that exists to be appreciated, discovered, and rediscovered, puzzled over, even doubted, but never to be known completely and fully, so that a future potential, possibility, or story is encouraged and not denied. In appreciating others as a wonder, in valuing their beings, I'm compassionate, humble, respectful, and gentle. For me, this is such a great inspiration, and I hope many of you resonate with it. And it goes back again to Socrates, for whom one of the biggest qualities was humbleness. Wonder makes you humble in the face of reality, because it makes you accept that indeed you cannot know everything. And actually, it is good sometimes not to know everything, not to imagine that you've understood the totality of what something is, and especially of what someone is. To relate to someone, another human being, from a position of wonder means to recognize them as a being that is still open to the future and open to the possible, and to marvel at that kind of openness. So that for me, I think, is a good bridge towards the very last part, where I want to tell you a little bit about the role of wonder in society and in education. So these are two very important topics for me. These are areas that I'm constantly reflecting about, and they're very much interconnected, because the way we educate reflects and kind of continues the way we build society, and the other way around. So here I have two images of Hannah Arendt and Heidegger, and they were collaborators and very close partners. And it's a bit of a history. In the history of wonder, if you study a bit the history of the concept, you discover a very interesting debate between them, or not necessarily between them, but a different take on wonder that relates very much to politics and living an engaged civic life. So Heidegger, I already mentioned him right before when I said that he was one of the big philosophers of the 20th century who promoted going back to an attitude of wonder and wondering. But if we remember the context in which Heidegger lived, around him, the Nazi regime, right? And what did he do? He didn't really stand up to it. Actually, he accepted to be a chair of philosophy in a German university at the time. And for many people, this was an implicit way of collaborating with the regime, right? So you might think, how did a philosopher who thought so deeply about wonder, how was he not able to wonder about what was happening just around him and the experience of other people? And here we go back to one of the first criticisms of wonder that I told you about. What if wonder disconnects us from the world? There is another fable, Thales of Milet, the big philosopher, one day, wandering at the night sky and walking about, falls into a ditch, right? And the slave girl who was with him, or the woman who was with him, takes him out and kind of makes fun of him, that he's wondering so much about the sky, but he doesn't see the hole in the ground in front of him. In many ways, maybe that's what happened. I mean, again, it's a much more complex issue, but that's one way of thinking of Heidegger's, surprising lack of reaction to what was happening just in front of him. If we take this stand, we might think that, okay, wonder might be a bit too paralyzing and too kind of sending us to a domain that is too abstract and too out there for public life. But Hannah Arendt actually came back, and she had a beautiful work where she explains that, and actually wonder is not about that. Wonder should make you an engaged citizen. Wonder should be that process that is crucial for a democratic and participative society in which people get to question the reality of how they live together. Think about it, in totalitarian regimes, the first people who have to go are those who wonder. I mean, not only philosophers, but, psychologists, for those who are psychologists, watch out. Artists, anyone who wonders too much represents a threat. And why? Because wonder precisely opens the mind beyond what is, and propaganda and other ways in which totalitarian regimes work want you to focus your mind only on one reality or one thing, and wonder makes you think in diverse ways. So it is an interesting debate. I'm definitely on the side of Hannah Arendt with this debate, and I have just one small example. This is the Romanian protests taking place in 2017, and in that period. I wasn't home. I deeply regret, I unable to be there. It was in the middle of winter. It was minus 10 degrees Celsius or even lower. And so many of my fellow Romanians joined, and there was a protest against corruption. And here they're in front of the government in Bucharest. And what you see there, you see some colors in the crowd, red, yellow, and blue, and this is the Romanian flag. But the interesting thing is that it was created with mobile phones. So they lifted up their phone and they coordinated the colors so that when you see the bigger image, you have this flag, right? Now, I'm not going to talk about the flag. It is a beautiful flag. But I'm gonna hypothesize with you that what happens when people come together to protest is actually something close to what I would call collective wondering. They get together into a state of mind in which they wonder, collectively about what else is possible. How else can we think of society than what it is at that moment? So I do hypothesize that a lot of the social movements and social change that is happening around us, and God knows we have so many movements because it is so necessary to have them, are based in many ways on this shared experience of wondering. Okay, I'm moving very close to the end, and I want to touch upon education as well. This is a contrasting image of a classroom, from long ago, on the right, and today's classrooms, or some of today's classrooms, right? And if you look at these images, you might easily or quickly assume that, look at those poor kids, or sitting in their benches, all kind of isolated from each other, and drawing the same F letter and the fish. Where is the wonder in there? Where was the wonder in that kind of education, where probably the knowledge was transmitted from the teacher to the student? And then you look at these other kids with virtual reality cameras, and you think they must be always in a constant frenzy of wondering, being curious, being in awe. I mean, look at their expressions as well. I think these are a bit easy assumptions, right? Because children in the old types of schools, which still exist very much, in many parts of the world, they do have opportunities to wonder. Wonder is not about the fancier technology you have. And those who have that high tech, they might use it to wonder or just waste time in many ways, or just wonder at, but never wonder about, and the other way around, right? So I want from the beginning to kind of save ourselves from these easy assumptions. Now, this is a list of questions that young children ask. This is a list taken from Reddit, from an online forum, and I find it hilarious. So what do young children ask about? These are things that parents or people around young kids heard them ask. Where does ink come from? How do magnets work? Why is it so hard to find a cure for AIDS? How is a rainbow formed? Why do babies cry? Why are some people ticklish? That's actually a very interesting question. Why is spinach green? Why is fire hot? Why do old people smell bad? Children would ask all sorts of things. Where do swear words come from, and so on. So this is, one measure of understanding that we are, from the very early on, beings that are very much open and engaged with the world, and capable of trying to wonder. Now, I'm not going to debate whether these questions express more curiosity or wonder. I will just point to the fact that I think that it's a natural inclination we have the moment we acquire language and culture to start thinking more deeply about why the world is like this and not like that. What makes the difference, or what are the possibilities embedded in it? So that's one aspect of the equation. On the other hand, I think we can all agree that that there are some troubling kind of things happening in many schools that really are not fostering wonder, or not making the most out of the potential to wonder that young minds have. So this is a quote from Pearsall, who said, "We have been trained to seek out quick explanations to our wonders, and then, upon hearing an answer, assume that we have nothing left to learn. Not surprisingly, learning has become boring for many students because we present the world as almost fully known. We have removed the mystery and turned the puzzles into simple ones that can be solved in a few neat steps. There is a neat and tidy path of learning. It is rare that we collectively wonder with an A in thought anymore, and so it becomes rare to wonder with an O." It is, I think, what most of us worry about when we think about at least some forms of education. We teach to the test. We teach to the answer. Teachers have come to class with a very prepared set of where students need to be at the end of the class. But this is so counter to the ethos of wondering. Wondering means not knowing where you're going to get, and actually enjoying a little bit that experience. So at the very end of the book, I started wondering myself about what would a pedagogy of wonder, or for wonder, look like. And I have just a few proposals. I'm sure the list is much wider. One of the things we can do, and I'm talking here not about primary school or only university, it can be any place. I mean, education permeates everything, the workplace, the family life. So it's much wider than just classrooms. One of the things is to be open to differences, to surprises, to the unexpected, to the difference in point of view between self and other, right? You remember that other people are one of these huge engines for our own sense of wondering. Another one is to start asking more unknown questions, meaning questions we don't know the answer to. As a teacher myself, I can tell you it can be very stressful, but I do enjoy it, deeply, launching a question that you don't know how to answer. You're just thinking through with the students in class. That is, is really quintessential for what a pedagogy of wonder would be like. Increase participation, because then you get the differences and points of view that I mentioned before as being important. Cultivate humbleness. Instead of assuming that you've solved it, you know it, you're smart, right? It's not about that. In wonder, it's being humble towards other people in the world, because there will always be an element of mystery or incomprehensibility in that world. And that is an element of possibility, right? So cultivating this intellectual humbleness, I think we would all benefit from. And wondering about wonder itself, bringing this topic up, making people, reflect a little bit about it. I think, again, it can go a long way. And maybe this small talk hopefully contributes a little bit to that aim. So finally, in the last section of the book, I have an epilogue that talks about living with uncertainty. And you might be thinking, I didn't expect when I wrote the book to be giving a talk during a pandemic online, no live audience. And you might be thinking, okay, Vlad, we have been living with uncertainty for a very long time. Why do we need more of it? Of course, there are uncertainties and uncertainties. Some of them are very life-threatening and existential and quite negative for our sense of self, of health, and all of that. But there is a deeper meaning of uncertainty, which is about not knowing fully what something is, what the future holds, which is a state of not kind of agnosticism or nihilism, of saying nothing matters, nothing can be known, but it's a sense of possibility, of keeping possibilities open. So I created this little cycle going around, starting from the corner top left, knowing that we don't know. This is the beginning of wonder. That's what is the beginning of philosophy as well, as Socrates wisely said. And then being open to learn, being explorative, engaging with that, wondering about. But in the process, accepting and living with the fact that some things we still do not know. Instead of going on the curiosity path and trying to solve everything and to satisfy our curiosity, to satiate it, to answer it fully and finally, just dwelling, as Heidegger said, a little bit into that unknown. And finally, learning from this very experience, from this very state of mind, which is wonder. And then going back to what we don't know and learning and so on and so forth. So this has been my proposal for you. I'm happy that I'm under 1 hour. I didn't know how long I would go. And thank you very, very much for being here. If you have questions, comments, we have only a few minutes, but I would be very happy to hear from you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. This was an amazing presentation. I really appreciate the questions.
Thank you.
Question, we have very much.
And afterwards, I see Elaine raise the hand. Yeah, tell me, René.
In education, you very often now have this outcome orientation, isn't it? The outcome is clearly defined. So I'm wondering if this is kind of influencing the way we are thinking these days, that we are going towards a goal which is predefined by others in education, but we are losing the ability to raise the probably more important questions. And that I think also applies very much to the more recent trends in higher education, isn't it? You have a clear goal which leads you directly to a new career, and that is pretty much predefined. And I think if you would look to Socrates or Aristotle, the philosophy was less predefined, and in that way it was much more open to human development.
Right. I have one view here, René, because it's important never to throw the baby with the dirty bathwater. So I completely am on board with you when you say that the outcome agenda is quite antithetical to wondering. I want to have a balanced view and you know, together with you and fellow educators, to know that of course outcomes are also important. And of course the state of wondering, which I completely promote, is something that perhaps you cannot sustain forever and for a long time. I mean, it becomes, you know, that's one of the accusations against Socrates and why he was made to drink poison. So what I'm trying to think about is, can we think of education in a way in which outcomes are still, you know, one element of doing education, but an element that we think about very, very differently. I mean, one thing that comes to mind directly is the path to the outcome. We often know, you know, an endpoint somehow, but we wonder less about how students get there. And sometimes we have, again, a predefined view of what they should know and how it should be taught. I mean, if teachers would give themselves in the first instance, at least the liberty to take different paths, they might even discover new and more exciting outcomes, you know, in the process. So thank you. I'm mindful of the time, and I know Elaine also raised her hand, and then I think someone else. I'm looking at the list. Elaine, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll be brief. Just thank you and congratulations. Just we've talked many times about wonder together, and it's embedded into my work. And just to reflect back a couple of things. One is, in exactly the way you describe, I see children 8 to 18 wonder in the classroom, and I've worked with them in the classroom. And what that does is raise democratic voice, which then presents the space within education where we have to accept that if we do this work with children, then we are raising democratic voice, which means the education system has to change. And obviously that rolls on and on into higher education. What also is deeply meaningful is, particularly now, and the fact that kids are trapped inside in many ways, is this connection between wonder and the planet and the action we need to take in climate action. Because if you put people, particularly kids, outside and use nature as the space to wonder, then it becomes, you know, the other is, if the other is nature, then it becomes utterly transformational. So I use that in my work. And just to, yeah, so every point.
I have a point about that as well, and thank you for raising it. I know that some people, I see quite a group of people logging in now, and if you come from the UK, probably you thought about the UK time, and unfortunately it's it being Central European time that the talk ended now. But I don't be too disappointed. We will probably make this talk public. I assume on YouTube. Sorry.
No. Ready to stop?
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, for those who joined now, I apologies. Yeah, we will make it available.
For you.
But let me just address a bit Elaine's point. So absolutely, Elaine, I completely agree that I should have put maybe nature, you know, in my different kind of strategies to cultivate wonder. Contact with nature is a primordial one, and you see that very much with the other strand, you know, connected to wonder, which is awe and the sublime. It was very much about nature and being in contact with nature. And if we saw the image of the flea as well with the microscope, that is very much again part of nature and how we connect to the natural environment. But beyond that, I think, you know, having an engaged attitude in the way Hannah Arendt talked about, in the face of the climate change and the climate, you know, challenge and threat we all live under, would go a very long way. So absolutely. And I think Hong Hong wanted to also ask something.
Oh, hi, thanks for the very nice presentation. Can you hear me? I don't see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have maybe a wondering to just see how you look at that, because we have discussed a lot about education and also how we can, for instance, integrate wonder or creativity thinking, creative thinking in the current education system. But I was wondering if is that also not like a change in perspective of the current society? It's like maybe really before, like when the human society starts, then the emphasis is the physical power, like how strong you are and how good that you are at hunting your food, etc. But then when it goes to, for instance, more industrialized society, then our focus is more on intelligence outcomes. And that's also how our education is formed at the moment. But now it's like, because of the advance of the civilization, then it's more and more that it reaches a possibility that we, how to say, the uncertainty is so large or is so strong that you need to be open to creative thinking or wondering. So I was wondering how you think about this kind of change, because it's also kind of boundary for the current society, right? We are talking about changing intelligence focused outcomes to creative outcomes, but in some way, can we also consider this is actually the next norm, and then you have to break it again?
Right.
But I'm curious how you think about that.
Well, thank you for raising this. I just want to make the announcement again, because I know 2 people logged in, that sadly it was 5 Central European times. If you come from the UK or other places, yeah, this is sadly the end of the talk, but we will probably have it on YouTube. And if you send me your email, I can also share the slides and everything. So you have my email down from this slide. So thank you for this question. It's really nice to bring in the historicity of this talk. And I tried a little bit to do that, right, with going very fast, the breakneck speed through Socrates and Descartes and so on. But we have to be aware that every era and every way of looking at wonder, either positive or negative or more in that way or this way, connected to the concerns of the people of that era. So it is really exciting to see so much new work on wonder, and it is really for us an opportunity in the 21st century to rethink these old Socratic, themes. And for me, it was precisely this connection with possibility and uncertainty that I think it's the big connection with where we are now in the 21st century. I think it deserves a much wider discussion, Hong Kong. I think we need to write something on that. But thank you for raising the question. I think Jill Hill on the chat said that there is a question. I don't know if.
Yeah, hi, sorry, I just put it in the chat because I wasn't sure which one was the hold your hand up, so apologies for that. So I was getting confused. So my area of research is insight and eureka, and particularly I've looked at negative insights, so uh-oh moments rather than aha moments. And I see a lot of similar sort of parallels again with what you were talking about in various aspects of this. One of the interesting things that seems to be coming out from the insight literature is that not everyone experiences insight, which to me was a complete mind-blowing thing. Well, how could someone not experience that eureka moment, that aha moment? So I'm wondering, so my question is, does everyone experience wonder?
It's a very good question. To my mind, yes, but you see, this talk has been quite theoretical, and as always, as we know with empirical research, the devil can be in the details. And my working definition, if you remember, was about awareness of possibility and exploration. So I do see these as quite human type of processes. So I would be very surprised, right? Bar any pathologies or things like that that really restrict your possibilities to do this. But it is an interesting question. I think it invites us to think, how would we measure or assess wonder? I'm not always a big fan of measurement, but again, just like with the discussion of outcomes in education, I do see that there is a usefulness, including for educators, to know when wonder would happen, right? So I'm completely with you with the need to maybe see if we can develop a way of understanding when and how people wonder more or less. And maybe that would be, for me, at least to my mind, would be a better way maybe of approaching it, the more or less versus absence or presence. But it is an open question. I would be very interested to know more about your work if you send me some of your studies.
Okay,
Excellent. Thank you very much. Anyone else? I think Andrea, I see you have a hand, but with a hello, or I don't know if it's a hand up. Maybe it's a hi. But if no one else has any questions, I realize that we're over time, and I thank you very, very much for being here, and thank you, Will, for introducing me. This is part of a lecture series that is part of the WCCI, the Webster Center for Creativity and Education, and we're starting our events mostly online. The next one will be given by Mark Stierand from the École Hôtelière of Lausanne, and it's about the aesthetic aspects of creativity. So if you're interested and if you're on the email list, and if not, email me, we can tell you when to log in again for more creativity and innovation related talks. Thank you very much again, everyone. And I'll make sure to put this online, or my colleagues will try to, so we hopefully can keep the conversation going. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vlad. And for everyone, I think everyone who's attending, we want to congratulate you again on the launch, the virtual launch tonight of the book. For those of you who just joined or joined late and didn't hear the title, it is Wonder, the Extraordinary Power of an Ordinary Experience, now available.
Thank you very much. Have a good rest of the day wherever you are. Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.